Hi, it's Steve from Part Select. Today we're going to show you how to change the damper pads on your washer, and it's a really easy job. All we're going to need is a Phillips screwdriver, a 3/8 socket with an extension on a ratchet. We'll also need a stiff putty knife. You may also require a 1/2 inch socket with an extension and a ratchet. 3 utility electrical boxes, a good wire brush, and if you're lucky enough to be able to borrow a brake wrench, we'll need one of those and a large hammer. Let me show you how we do it. Now there are 2 methods to change the damper pads on these washers. Both require removing a front panel and also unsecuring the main top. So we're going to start by taking the front panel off. Once we've disconnected the supplies and pulled the washer out where we can get at it, we can tilt it back and lean it up against the wall, and then remove the 2 Phillips screws on the front panel. And we're going to just lift away on the bottom of that front panel, tilt it, and unhinge the 2 spring clips at the top of the front panel that engage the main top. Next, we'll remove the 2 3/8 bolts that secure the main top to the cabinet. Now the instructions that come with that damper kit suggest that you can loosen these eye bolts that secure the springs to release the tension of that tub onto the damper, but you can also leave the adjustments intact by simply using a utility electrical box, and we'll jam that into the spring. So we'll start by lifting the main top up, make sure that we can support that and the lid. And then what we'll do is we'll take those boxes, we'll push the tub away from the spring to stretch it, and then we're going to just jam that box onto the spring, and that will allow us to then pull the tub towards us and disconnect it. While using that method, we have not altered the adjustment of those eye bolts. So you can do that for the 2 rear springs as well. Just pull the tub away from the spring to put tension on it, set the electrical box on it, and push the tub back into it, and that will release the tension on the spring. Now once we've removed all 3 of the suspension springs, we can then put our main top back down. And then we're going to carefully tilt the washer back, and we'll set a 4x4 block directly under the center of the drive pulley. And then just tilt the washer forward. You'll see now that we've lifted that damper away from the base, and as long as we have that securely sitting on top of that 4x4, we can get in there and remove those damper pads. Now if you're not comfortable in using that method, because there is a fair bit of weight there and your hands will be in an area that is potentially quite dangerous, you can as well tilt the washer back and remove the brake package, and that threads into this damper assembly. Once you remove that, then you can lift the whole tub and support brackets completely out of the washer, and then you have free access to that damper area to change the pads. We start by rolling the belts off. And next, just pop this little grease cap off. You'll see a Phillips screw there that secures a little drive lug. So remove the screw. And if need be, just take a flat blade and pry that drive lug off. We can then spin that pulley off. There's also a bearing that's located in here. You'll see that's a conical shaped bearing. So it will sit on the pulley so that the height of it is at its lowest position, because it will fit both ways. So we want to set it on there so that it sits almost flush. Now, to remove the brake assembly to service that damper, we'll begin by removing that 7/16 bolt. That secures a small retaining clip. There are two little teeth on that retaining clip that will stick into the threads on that brake. And if we can secure a brake wrench, we want to make sure that the lugs on this wrench contact the tabs on the back of the brake and not any screws that may be protruding through on certain types of brakes. So just rotate that around. It should lay flat against the brake. And then with a large hammer, we're going to give that a good wrap, and then just rotate that brake counterclockwise until it completely unthreads from the damper assembly. And pull it off. There will also be a large spin bearing that will sit in that brake as well. Now that'll allow us to lift that whole damper assembly off of the main base. Now that we have the main top up, we have our air dome tube removed from the side of the tub, our tub to pump hose removed, the main drive pulley and brake removed from the bottom, and all three suspension springs removed. We can now lift that whole tub and transmission assembly out of the washer. Now it's a fairly heavy unit, so you will probably want some help in lifting it out of there. And the bottom of that will be a little bit oily, so you need to be able to set it on a safe surface once you remove it. Get out the damper pads to remove the old ones and to install our new ones. And with the damper removed, you can see where the damper pads are adhered to that main base. So using a putty knife, I'm just going to get in underneath the edge of those and scrape the old ones off. And once we've got the old pads off of there, we're also going to remove any of the adhesive or pieces of the old pad so that we have a nice clean surface to put a new adhesive on. So either using your putty knife or a wire brush, we're going to clean that up and then we'll wipe it down with solvent. And once we've got that damper area free of old adhesive and bits of the old damper pads, wipe it down completely with either mineral spirits or a solvent to make sure that we have a nice clean surface. And then we're going to take either contact cement or rubber cement or a high temp adhesive, and we'll put a bead of that all the way around that base area there so that these damper pads will sit just about 3/32 of an inch from the top edge all the way around. Now once that adhesive gets tacky, we can place those damper pads in position. You'll find that there'll be about a 5/8 of an inch gap between the ends of each pad. So just make sure that they're spaced evenly and that they're firmly pressed into the adhesive. And then allow that adhesive to dry before we apply the Polylube grease to all three of those pads, and that will provide the proper dampening for the tub. Now while the adhesive is setting up on those damper pads, we should also have a close look at the damper itself. And this metal surface has to sit on top of those pads. We want to look for any signs of any corrosion or damage to that damper assembly, and if there is, then it will need to be replaced. It needs to be a very polished surface to sit on those pads. So next we'll apply the poly grease that comes with that kit. Apply a liberal amount to each of those pads, and then just wipe it into the pads so that it's absorbed. And do the same for all three. We're now ready to lift the whole assembly back into the washer. So just carefully line it up with the opening in the bottom. Rotate the tub around. Sit it down on top of the base. Make sure the damper is centered. Now that we have the tub in position, we can go ahead and reconnect our air dome tube, our tub to pump hose, our suspension springs, the main brake and drive pulley, and then complete the assembly. Now to reassemble, we'll make sure that we have that bearing fully inserted into the brake. Slide it up until it starts to, threads start to catch. We'll install the brake wrench. Tighten it securely, and then we'll put the retaining clip in. Reinstall that 7/16 bolt. Now use a little caution when tightening that bolt that you don't over tighten it and snap it off inside the damper assembly. You can now reinstall the pulley and the belts. So we'll take that drive pulley and the bearing, line it up on that shaft, just rotate it clockwise. Now while grasping that pulley, we're going to turn it clockwise until the whole transmission starts to turn, and just do that a couple times just to get that in position. Now to set that drive lug, we'll note that there is a slightly rounded side to it and then a sharper side. So the sharper side will face up, rounded side down, and we're going to position this lug just prior to the stop lug on the pulley. When we have it turned clockwise until we meet the resistance of the brake, just before the transmission will start to turn, just hold it in that position. And then we're going to set that drive lug with about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch gap between this edge and the actual edge of the stop lug on the pulley. So when we turn that, we should meet resistance with only a gap of 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. Now make sure that that drive lug is fully inserted onto that shaft and it is flush with the bottom of the shaft. Don't use the screw and washer to pull it on. If you need to, tap it on with a small hammer. And then just install the screw to secure it. And then reinstall the dust cap and the belts. Large belt on the upper portion of the pulley and onto the drive pulley. The thinner belt goes on the bottom portion of the motor pulley across to the pump. Now with the new pads in place, we're just going to tilt that washer back. We'll remove our 4x4 block, and then we'll sit it back down into position. We'll raise the main top and the lid, and then we can reinstall the suspension springs. This is just starting with the rear corners first, and hook the bottom of the spring into the eye bolt first. Tilt the tub back towards the spring and then engage the top hook. And once we've got the 2 rear springs in place, we'll now install the front one. And again, we'll hook the bottom in first, make sure that the adjusting nut comes up through the opening in the base, pull the tub towards the spring, and insert the top hook into the slot. Now once we've got all 3 positioned properly, And the adjusting nuts exposed through the base. We just pull the tub away from the spring, release the electrical boxes that we used for stretching the springs, and again make sure that all the adjusting bolts have popped up through the base. And we can now put the main top back down. Now when positioning that main top with the cabinet, you'll note on the right hand side typically there are two spots that look like that bolt might fit through. It's actually the front set of holes that we're going to line up. So we want to make sure that we start both bolts before we tighten anything. And if your model had a bleach hose on it, make sure that we have that fully inserted onto the bleach cup. And then it's secure at the bottom. And also make sure that we didn't dislodge the tub to pump hose, that the clamps are secure there. Now reinstall the front panel. Just hook the two spring clips at the top under the main top, tilt it down into position, and install the retaining screws. We're now ready to reconnect the inlet hoses, the drain hose, and the power, and our repair is complete.